Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Michele Jutrisa and I'm an independent demonstrator of Stampin' Up here in New South Wales, Australia. Today we're going to do something I haven't done for a long time, and it's something that I really love doing, and we're going to play with some inks and some water painters and create a card using our watercolour paper as well. So before we get started, please jump on, say hello, let us know where you're from. It's always great having people on here with me and having a bit of a chat. So let me turn my camera down and we'll get started, and I'm sure as people jump on, they'll all say hello as well. So let me bring my table up. And the stamp set we're going to play with is Charming Day. Haven't played with this for a little while, so it was good to pull this out and have a bit of a play with it. So we're going to be colouring the three images, which is the large floral image, the small floral image, and some leaves. We're going to be using our watercolour paper. So this is the Stampin' Up! Fluid 100 watercolour paper, which is really great for if you're doing watercolouring. Hello, Leslie. Thanks for jumping on. So that's what we're going to be using. The colours I've chosen to use today are Berry Burst, which is not a colour I tend to go for straight up, but we're going to use Berry Burst. We're going to use, excuse me, bear with me today. I've got a little bit of a sore throat. So Berry Burst, Peach Pie, and then Mossy Meadow. So they're the three colours I'm going to colour with. I'm also using Stays On ink because we're doing watercolour painting, so there's water involved, so we do need our Stays On. Another reason why I wanted to jump in and use this Charming Day is I really love this stamp set, but it is one of the red rubber ones, which is going to be going soon. Now, when you're using watercolouring, I do suggest and watercolour paper that you have some sort of positioning tool. I've got the old Stampin' Up! One, which we don't sell anymore, but I really I can't afford to go out and buy another one, so that's really what it all boils down to. But I'm going to use this one, and it will enable me, any repositioning tool will enable you to go back and restamp over and over again to make sure you've got good coverage. This is a full sheet of the watercolour paper, and I am going to be using that. The only thing I may do is I may just bring these stamps up a little bit closer. I'm sort of just playing in their positioning earlier. So let me just bring these up a little bit closer to each other. I'm just trying not to get ink on it. I have got ink on this and I haven't cleaned it as yet. So bear with me 1 second. So I'm going to bring that just about there because I do want to maybe stamp some others. So I'm going to ink this up with my Stays On. Now I have just re-inked my Stays On ink because I don't use it a lot. As I said before, I haven't done any watercolouring for a long time, so and when I was playing around before it was a little bit dry, so let's hopefully we get a good coverage. But by using our repositioning tool, I can stamp this a couple of times and get more coverage. So let's just have a look. Do need to add a bit more. It's still probably a little bit dry. It's amazing how much these ink pads can dry up. And of course, when you purchase the ink pad through Stampin' Up, you can also purchase ink refills as well. So pop that down, give it another good push just to see if we can get a better coverage. And that's looking a lot better. Now, I do want to get maybe those two again, but so I'm going to, let's just have a quick look. No, I'm going to clean these off because I do want to stamp at least that leaf another time, and I could take it off and put it onto a regular stamping block, but I want to get good coverage, so I still want to use this repositioning tool. So I'm just using my Stays On Cleaner. Now, Stays On Cleaner can also be purchased through Stamping Up and through my online store. And this is really good when you're using Stays On, because Stays On is a permanent ink. So this will help remove it. Now, this is the fiddly part, because what I should be cleaning it with is with this. So I'm going to just take that part off for the moment and give it a really good, now this is my broken one. I don't know where my new one is, but I'm going to give this a really good sort of scrub with that. Now, when we get our photopolymers, and if you use the Stays On ink, straight after using your photopolymer stamp, as I was saying last week, you should actually do this straight away, both with the Stays On remover, but also I come in with my regular stamping mist as well, because this just leaves a little bit of a residue on your stamp. And the stamp cleaner here, which I have to refill, has got, not only does it clean, but it actually looks after your red rubber and your photopolymer stamps as well. So I'm just going to give that a bit more of a, it's not a really good way of doing it. It's easy when you've got these on a block. Let me just pop these away for the moment. Pop them there where I don't need them. I'm going to give this a really good wipe now. I just like to get all that Stays On off, because I just think it's a does leave a residue. It's a little bit of an oily residue. So by giving it a good scrub with the Stamp and Scrub, you're getting in and getting all that ink from all of those crevices. And then just the stamp cleaner then just gives it a really, removes that residue. And then my cloth here just removes anything else. So I want to remove these two stamps. So now I've got them clean. I can remove that one, and I can remove this one. I'm just going to pop them to one side for the moment. And I just want to use this one here. So let me bring in this again. And I'm just going to position that just there. Now, I probably should use a magnet. I did have a magnet on this before. I've just managed to lose it somewhere. Goodness knows where I've lost that. It's connected itself to something. Oh, there it is. Okay, let's stamp a couple more of these. So I just want to make sure I get a really good coverage. One. And I'm just going to move this down. I only probably want to do 3 of these, just in case I want to use them. There we go. Beautiful. So there's that. Whoops, don't want to do that. We'll keep them separated. Put a bit of scratch paper in there just so then that ink doesn't transfer onto that mat. And let's just pop this away for the moment somewhere as well. So that can just go up there for the time being. Okay, so let's start with doing some watercolouring. Now, I can't remember, Stampin' Up were having issues with getting their water painters, so I think they've been removed. These are my favourite water painters. They're really El Cheapos. I've still got the Stampin' Up ones, but I've been using these ones I don't know how many years, and I don't even know where I got them all from now, but they're just the ones my go-to. So I'm using those. The Stampin' Up ones are quite good. They have 3 different widths. These ones here, I have 2. This is my favourite because I've got a really fine point on that. But they're just a water, they're They're a pen or a paintbrush that's got a barrel on the end of it that holds water in it. As I said, I picked these up years and years and years ago. And this one here has just got a really nice fine point. So I really enjoy using this one when I'm watercolouring. I've got a piece of paper towel just there to clean my brush. Hello, Joan. Hello, Lorraine. How are you? And so let's start colouring. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do. You can start off with your watercolouring. You can lay some clean water onto your image. Sometimes that can be good, but you don't want to have too much water. Sometimes I like to, and it depends on the effect that you're trying to get. Sometimes I like to work with a wet brush and a dry paper. The reason why I'm using watercolour paper, it will hold the water. If you're using your basic white, it will tend to break down, whereas a watercolour paper will hold the water that you're using. If you lay down water first, you can allow the water to wick the ink out into your flowers, and the ink will only go where there's water being laid. So if you've got an area that's got not much water at all, or no water at all, then the ink won't go there as much. But as I said, I'm going to work with this with a dry paper, and I'm going to add my water to my ink. Now, when you get your ink pad, what I generally do is I put my ink pad in between my two palms and give that a really good squeeze. Lorraine, you're watching sitting in your backyard. It's so hot here today. Oh, lucky you. We had a beautiful hot day. I think it was Tuesday. It was lovely. I had to open up the house. We're still in winter, and it wasn't a real hot, but it was just a nice day to open the house. Probably if you sat in the shade, it'd be a bit cold. But the last few days, that was Tuesday, Wednesday, I think it rained, and it was very cold. And yesterday and today, very, very windy, because we're heading into our windy months here in the Southern Highlands. So, yeah, a lot of wind, very cold, and apparently there might be some snow around in some places. So the snow hasn't left us yet. Now, by squeezing your ink pad, what you're doing is you're transferring your ink from the pad into your lid, and that's going to cause a well for you to add your colouring to. Now, I like to have two densities in ink there. Let me just bring that down so you can see it. You can see this one here is very thick, and then here is sort of a little bit less ink, and here hardly any. I'm going to start off with having on sort of hardly any ink and more water, because I'm going to add that as it goes. Oh, 37, beautiful. I'm getting sick of the cold. I really am. I've had enough of it. I've just realised I've got a little bit of my leaf there that didn't catch, but that's okay. With my type of watercolouring, I sort of tend to pounce my brush a bit rather than brushing it all on. I like to leave a little bit of white space, and I start off with using very minimal amount of ink and more water, and then build it up. And I build it up as the paper starts drying out. If you start building up your colour while you've still got a lot of water on the surface of your paper, then that ink is just going to keep wicking out. If you get too much ink in one spot and you want to take it away, you can dab it off with a clean piece of paper towel. So let's get started, and as we work along, hopefully you'll see what I do. So I'm just going to wet my brush and just give it a bit of a squeeze and get that water coming down from the barrel. And I'm going to just pick up a little bit of ink here. Now you can, if you want, just drop in a drip of water, because as I said, we want to start off very, very light and then work our colours up. Now I'm just going to move this around a little bit, because I tend to move my paper around as I work. And I'm going to start with my big flower, and I'm going to start in the centre. As I said, I'm just adding just a little bit of colour, not much, and I'm just pouncing that around, Because if I miss certain areas, that's fine. I'll come back and I'll add it if I want to. If you have a bit of white space, that is okay. You don't have to be really pedantic about covering the whole thing. It's really what the look that you like. And I like the look that it looks like it's a watercolouring. So if you have a look at watercolours that other people do, you'll see that they usually have some areas that's still got a bit of white space on there. Now that's just got really the minimal amount of colour in there, because what we're going to do is as we build it up, we're going to add more layers. So I'm going to colour in the next flower now, because this one is starting to dry. I'm going to start in my centre, because of the stronger colour I want in the centre of my flower, and I'm just going to pounce this around on the outer edges and just work out around. And as I said, if I get areas that are white, I'm not really overly like, I don't care. The white is good. Now I'm going to do the same with this flower here, because while this is drying, I can start working on the next one. Again, I'm just pouncing it. I'm not being accurate. If I go outside the lines, that's okay, because we're going to cut this down with the dies that go with it. And that's going to allow cut away some of those excess areas. And sometimes too, you want a little bit of colour going out a little bit. You want it to look like it's a watercolour. Now, I've just dried off my brush a little bit because I don't want as much, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick up the next, so the same colour, but the next one around, and having a little bit more strength in it. Again, I'm just going to start off with the centre by just pouncing. As I said, if you get too much colour in there, you can just blot it out, even adding a little bit more water. So it's up to you to how much water you want to put in there. I'm just going to squeeze a little bit more. And the reason why I like this fine tip is I can pick up just a little bit of colour when I want just a little bit of colour. And all I'm going to do now is just add a little bit more around. Now, if you've got certain areas and you don't like how it looks, just go in with a little bit of a wetter brush and brush it out. The colour will move because you're working on watercolour paper, and that's what it's all about. So what I'm going to do is I'm just adding more colour. Got a little bit of a drier brush, and I'm just adding more colour just around underneath all those leaves, or petals, I should say. And just building those colours up. If you don't like an edge on part of it, just go back in with a dry brush, put a little bit of more water on there, and just wipe it away. Dry brush as in not adding any more colour. So I'm just building up these colours. I don't mind having the definition between, so you can see, I'm just trying to be the good one, that one there, whoops, that one. You can see there's like a bit of a sharper colour between the two. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of water to there, and that will just blend that out a little bit more. But sometimes those lines are good because those actually show that they are watercolour. But as that dries, you'll see a bit more of the intensity of the colour coming through. So I'm just going to work on the second flower. Now, a lot of this comes with just practicing. I haven't been taught by anybody, and I've just practiced and practiced. I go and I've bought myself a cheaper watercolour paper, and I will get that out and I will just play and practice until I find a technique that suits me, that works well for me, because not every technique is going to suit everybody. it's not going to work with your, some people are a little bit more heavier handed and like to work with brighter colours and so forth, and that's their technique. So just play around with it. Mine is sort of more pouncing rather than colouring in, but just play around with it and work out what you like to get and how you like to have your colours looking and how you like to use your brush. Okay, remember there's no right or wrong. It is really the look that you like to get. And you can see in this one here, I'm pouncing around and I'm only going around the outer edges, so I'm not really trying to brush that colour on evenly across the whole petal. I'm just taking areas that I want to have that colour in. And as I said before, if you're not happy with something, you can just dry off your brush, put a little bit, dampen it a little bit more, and go over it again. Now I'm just going to come in now with a stronger colour. So I've got a very dry brush at the moment. I haven't squeezed any water in there. And I'm going to come in and add a little bit more in through there. Now just pouncing it again. Now you can see there that that's quite dark. If I'm not happy with that, I can just dampen my brush a little bit. Get a little bit of water coming down those nibs and come back in here and just water that out. And I'm just going to give that a little bit of a blot. Come back in here and add a bit more in here. But remember that flowers in the garden, if you go and have a look at them, aren't all exactly the same. You will find imperfections in nature. And all we're doing is a representation of what we see in nature. So it's don't think you have to have this perfectly right. Just want to water that down a little bit more. You got to be very careful with some colours, like Berry Burst. You could end up with, because it is a fairly strong colour, so you could end up with a lot of colour if you're not careful. So what I'm trying to do is trying to keep this not too, like I want the colour, I want it to be bright. I don't necessarily want pastel, but I just want to make sure as well that I'm not going so bright that it's overpowering. And I'm just going over this now with just a little bit of a damp brush. I've got no ink on my brush at the moment, and I'm just blending some of those areas that I think are a little bit too dark. I'm just blending that in a little bit more. But this is where you can just come in and just add layer after layer until you get the effect that you're wanting to get. So I'm going to leave that one, I think, for a little bit. I just put a little bit more into that petal there. And I'm going to come in onto the next flower. And then this little one over here, we'll come back and add some more depth into that. Sometimes it's good too just to let each layer dry before going in with the next one. Those ones there, I just added a little bit of extra water just to blend those dark areas out. Just coming in with a semi-dry brush and just blending that out a little bit. One left to go on this one. And because what you can do sometimes, it's always good to leave something and then come back and have another look. And you can reactivate the colours when you come back in and have another look. So I'm just going to blend some of this out. I've got no ink on my pen at the moment, and I'm just wanting to go over this with a little bit of a dry brush. Maybe put a little bit more colour in the centre, because the centres of our flowers can be a little bit stronger in colour. I'm also just blending a little bit of the blotchiness out a little bit till I'm happy with what I'm doing, but I'm actually not adding any colour there. So that's what I've done so far. And I think I'm going to leave that. So now the next colour I'm going to bring in is my Mossy Meadow. Again, give it a really good squeeze between your hands to transfer that ink into your lid, and then you can use that as a palette. Make sure your brush is clean before you go on to the next one. You just clean it by giving it a good squeeze, letting that water drip down into the bristles and wiping it off. So again, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to add a little bit of water in here. You don't need to make it floating, but just add a little bit of water. And I'm going to, whoops, I've got a little bit of fluff there. I'll let that dry for a second and then I'll get that fluff off. So again, I'm just going around and I'm just adding the colour. Now the darkest area is going to be up here again, underneath the petals. And again, I'm doing the same sort of thing. I'm just moving a little bit of this around and sort of almost pouncing rather than brushing it on. Again, leaving some white area. And I'm going to go around all of those leaves. By the time I get back to the beginning, those first ones would have been almost dry. But all I'm doing is just adding a little bit of the lightest colour. Into there, and then I'm going to do the same with these ones down here. And then the same with the little ones here on the little branches. I'm just going to quickly colour those in as well. Really, some of these are it's just one wipe with your nib. Now I'm going to go back onto this one and I'm going to pick up a little bit more colour. I'm not adding any more water into the lid there. I'm just picking up a bit more colour. Start with these bigger ones here and I'm just going to add that. And again, I'm just sort of pouncing or even squiggling. I'm even just doing a little like a going backwards and forwards a little bit. Bring the colour down on one side wherever you want to have shading. I don't tend to worry about where the shading is and where the sun is. going to manage to pick up a little bit of fluff from somewhere. When you go to blot, just make sure that you're using a clean section of your paper towel. You don't, or even have another piece of paper towel handy. You don't want to be transferring ink from your paper towel onto your wet surface. So again, I'm just adding it to the top and pulling it down. Each one can be a little bit different. They don't need to all be the same. That one there's probably a little bit too much ink, so I'm just going to wipe that off. Come back in and let's just use the ink that's already there and let's move that around. Just going to blend that out a little bit there. Just soften those lines. Now this is the one I didn't get enough on the ink on the original stamping, so I've just put a bit more colour into that just to help define that edge of that leaf. A tiny little leaf just in here that's tucked away. And too, the colour will change once the paper starts to dry. So just be very aware that you might want to come back in and add a bit more. But by having a very fine tip nib on your brush will allow you to get into those smaller areas. If it's too broad, then you're not going to get into those finer areas such as these little leaves here. I'm just adding a little bit more colour into them. So I actually think I'm quite happy with all of that. That doesn't take that long to do. There's only one little spot that I have left to do. So I've just got to close up this and I'm going to bring in my peach pie. Clean off my brush again. Now if you do get like a little bit of, say, the berry burst into the green, don't worry about it too much. Just blend it in, because sometimes leaves have a bit of brown in them or even a bit of red in them. So, you know, sometimes having that little bit extra colour, they're not always a flat colour. So what I've got here is I've got some peach pie, and all I'm going to do is just give this a bit of a pounce in there, just to add a bit of colour. My centre of my flower, and that's all that needs, just in the centre there. So give my brush a bit of a clean. And pop those away. So I'm just going to leave that now just for a little bit. and get started on another part of the card while we're letting that dry, because I do want that to be dry quite thoroughly before I start cutting those out. So what I've got for my card base, I want a sort of a vintagey style of card. I didn't want to have something that was going to be too bright, but I wanted to bring some of the colours in. So again, I've got the berry burst in my cardstock, but I also found in the paper pack that goes with the stamp set, which is this one here, which is called Floral Charm Designer Series paper. One of the papers, which is this one on the back, which is again your berry burst, has this mottled sort of colour. So here's your cardstock, and then that's the Designer Series paper. So you can see there's like a wash on that. So I thought instead of using just a plain solid colour for my matting and so forth, I'm actually going to use this Designer Series paper as my mat, just for the fact that I want it to show through a little bit. Now I'm going to try something here. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but we don't know until we give it a try. So I'm going to pop that to one side because I don't need those. I will put all my measurements and everything onto my blog over the weekend. So what I've got here, I've got a card base in basic beige. I've cut two matte pieces, one for inside my card and one for the front of my card. I've got a card front also in basic beige, and I've got a card insert also in basic beige. Then I've just got a scrap of the Designer Series paper. Not quite sure yet where I'm going to use that, but that was just sort of like as an option. And then I've got another scrap here, which I'm hoping is going to be big enough to put my sentiment on. And I'm making this as a happy birthday card for a young lady who's quite special in our family. So I've taken my card base. I'm doing a 10-fold. I've folded that in half, and I'm just going to burnish that now with my bone folder. We are going to do a little bit more die cutting because I want to use this oval, which also comes from another set, which is Impressions of Bloom. I put my dies in with them, and this set that comes with two. This one here will just cut out the oval. This one here will cut out a fine trim of an oval that you can adhere on top. But I just want that for the moment. This is where we're going to play and see if this all works. So I'm going to pop this to one side. I'm going to grab one of my pieces of the basic beige. And what I want to do is I want to die cut that out. Now I am going to sit it up a little bit higher. So I'm not doing an equal distance here at the bottom. I'm sitting it up a little bit higher. I did show card and ticket writing when I was back in high school, and they always taught me that you should have a wider border at the bottom and a narrower border at the top, and that's so that things don't look like they're falling off. And I followed that rule right through, whether I'm doing scrapbooking or whether I'm doing card making. I've tried to make it so it looks like it's meant to be, and I find that having that border on the bottom that's wider, don't always do it, but most times I do, just helps in getting everything to look like it's meant to be in that spot. Now I'm just going to grab my plates. So I've got my plate 1 and 2, and then my 2 embossing cutting plates. So they're plates 3, and I'm going to pop that on there. As I said, I'm going to have it slightly more to the top, making sure that is centered side to side. You could put Post-it note on that. Actually, I've got one here which I'll just use. Pop that onto there, and that'll just make sure that stays where I want it to go. We're going to form like a peekaboo hole type thing in the center of our card front. that away for the moment. Now, I've got someone here that said hello. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce your name. I'm not great at pronunciations the best of time. So I'm just going to say good morning anyway, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm not even going to try because I'll either just make myself look silly, most likely. But I'm glad to have you joining us. So there's our circle there. So I've got my piece of designer series paper. Now we could adhere that directly on top of that. Now I just want a little bit of a edge, but I think what I want to do is actually put dimensionals underneath this part here. So what I think I might do is I'm going to grab my card base and I'm going to adhere my mat directly to my card base. Usually I put my mat, oh, excuse me, so let me just have a quick drink, sorry. Usually I put my mat and my card front and my mat together and then attach it to my card front, my card base. But this time around, I'm going to actually attach this first. Now, Lorraine, I hope you've had a wonderful day because it's your birthday, isn't it? So I hope you're having a fantastic day and your family are all spoiling you. So I'm going to pop that on there. Just giving that a really good rub just to make sure that all the glue underneath is not just globbering up in one spot. Put the lid on that so that doesn't dry out. And then we're going to pop some dimensionals. Now, by popping this up on a dimensional, it's going to cause or create like a shadow box type of effect. So I've got my large dimensionals here. And I'm going to put quite a few on here because I just don't want this falling. So I don't want sort of sunken areas. I might have to grab a couple of mini ones and pop some mini ones down there. Oh, that's good. And I'm going to pop another one there. Another one there. As I said, I'm going to pop quite a few on here. And then I just want a couple mini ones just on those outer edges. Seems like it's a little bit overboard, but I'm going to put a fair bit of weight on here by the time I put my, because watercolour paper is a little bit more weighty than regular paper. So by the time I pop that on, I don't want it to sort of collapsing. So let's take all these off the back. Now this is going to be the tricky part, is getting this on square. I think I've got them all now. Okay, so I want to pop this on. It's only got a very, very, whoops, This is where, as I said before, it's very tricky because I only want a very, very fine edge all the way around. Sometimes I find it's easier to go from the longer length. Probably a little bit out, but that, look, I mean, I don't think I can tell that too much. I think that's looking nice. And as you can see, it's created a bit of height between this level here and this one, which is giving you a little bit of a shadow box feel. So now I'm going to grab my other piece of Design Series paper and my other piece of Basic Beige, and I'm just going to adhere these two together. And these can go into the inside of my card. Now we will decorate these up a little bit more in a moment, but I just want to get this all inside the card. Now, of course, you don't have to use multi-purpose glue. I just like using that because it allows me to move the card into position where I want it. If you use dry glue like the tapes and so forth, you sort of don't get a second chance to move things. Okay, so again, I'm just going to give that a good rub. So there's our card base done. So now we should go back to our die cutting. So that's that all beautifully done. So let's pop that to one side. Let's grab our dies here. So I've got the 3 outline dies, which are going to cut these pieces here. Let's pop that one to one side. We don't need that. Now I'm going to do this. You can cut around this and run it through your mini cut and emboss. I'm going to do it, see if I can do it in 1 or 2 goes because I need to cut those out 3 times. But all once using my big cut and emboss machine. Also, too, I probably, if I was not doing this on a live, I would have all those images stamped a little bit closer to each other. I mean, the watercolour paper isn't the cheapest paper to purchase, and I do have quite a amount of space in there because I just didn't want to be sort of going over the top of everything, so I've sort of given myself plenty of movement there. Now, I just do need... and I just want to find out where I've actually popped it. My Post-it note tape. Grab this from in here. There's that one I was using earlier. And we're just going to line up these dies. And I'm going to use a couple of pieces of tape, just for the fact that I don't want any of this to move. By using the larger machine, I can cut everything all at once. Oops, run out of that colour. And we can cut one of these leaves as well. So we can cut those 3 pieces out all at once. Run that through. and just very gently peel that tape off, because the watercolour paper has been wet. If there's still any wet spots, you do want to just work very gently just to make sure that you don't tear the surface. So there we go. There's one flower cut. Our second little flower, which I'm going to use on the inside of our card. And now we just have to cut these. Now, I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to be using all of those or not, but it's good to have them cut and ready to go. If I don't use them now, I'm sure I'll use them another time. Fortunately, we have to do this one at a time, so we'll run that through. Now, does anyone have any questions to me about the watercolouring painting or not? Or do you do it yourself, or do you tend to stay away from it because you're not quite sure? Have any questions? Can't promise I can answer, but I will try to the best I can. And as I said before, it is really just practicing. Get yourself some cheap watercolour paper and just practice. Whoops, I'm just going to, haven't even started cutting through that yet. I've noticed that's moved a little bit. Let's just pop that back on again. Now, I don't throw away these scraps of watercolour paper. If I want to do other techniques or I want to practice, I will come back to these scrappy bits. Or if I've got little things I want to cut, not so much big things. So these leftover pieces of watercolour paper get all stored so they can be used again. So that's this piece here. I'm not going to throw that away. I've got a sleeve here. And as I said before, I've got cheaper Montmartre watercolour paper that I picked up at a cheap shop. I have got other scraps here where I have played using different coloured inks, and I've cut them out. So you can see that one there was cut out in little hexagons at one stage, and I will use those for other die cut bits and pieces. So all those little scrappy pieces of your watercolour paper, don't throw them away. They do come in handy. And it's just too expensive just to throw it in the bin. You tend to stay away from it, Leslie. Well, how about giving it a go? Hi, Lucia, how are you? Grab yourself a cheap watercolour, some cheap watercolour paper. I mean, that was Montmartre. That's very cheap, and you can pick that up in a lot of different places. I think even Spotlight and that carry it. Use that and just practice, just play. I mean, it's whether you're working with blends, watercolour pencils, whatever, it's a matter of playing. And that's all I've done, is I've just played with what I've had until I've come up with something that I'm reasonably happy with. And even this morning, before I did today's, I played. That's where I played with. So I've now got 2 sets of flowers. So that was my playing for earlier today. This is what we've created now. So, practice and practice and practice works. It's, you're having fun as well as practicing. I don't know how to tell people to practice more. It's just getting in there and having fun. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it works in some places and not in other places, then you know, keep those bits of scraps to cut off somewhere else, or, you know, to use for something else. It's, you know, there's no right or wrong. You just keep playing and playing until you get it right, or until you, not so much get it right, until you're happy with what you've got. So, Leslie, practice, play, you know, just have a bit of fun. Shut yourself off in your craft area and have some fun. Okay, so here's our card base, and now we're going to decorate it. I've already done some die cutting because I knew today was going to take a little bit of time. So what I've already done is I've already cut in Mossy Meadow some of these leaves, but I also cut some in the Old Olive as well. So I've got those leaves, that's the big branch that comes with the dies, and that smaller one. So I've cut them in both because I wasn't quite sure which colour I was going to use, and I do love Mossy Meadow and Old Olive together. And even though I painted all of this in Mossy Meadow, it does have the tones of Old Olive in it, so you can mix it all up. So let's start laying this out and see what we come up with. Now, I still have a sentiment to work out and stamp. Now I'm going to have my little flower towards the top. So I'm going to pop that there. Now I've got two levels here because remember we've sort of created like a type of a shadow. So the areas that are sitting onto my card front, which is this basic beige piece, are either going to be glued down or use dimensionals, but then the area underneath would have to have double dimensionals. That's one on top of the other. You sandwich it up. I'm probably going to glue these down flat because I don't really want to make it too high, but I also want to slip some of these leaves and everything in and around. So let's just start playing. We'll do a dry fit first and work out where we want things to go. So I'm going to pop that underneath there. Probably going to regret putting so many dimensionals in a minute because I won't be able to pop these in areas where I want it to go, but that's okay. We'll work this all out. I'd rather have this basic beige part well supported than not. Okay, let's just start with adding maybe this piece coming down there. I do have these leaves here. I want this piece for the inside of my card. So, but I do want to stick a few of these on there as well. So I'm just sort of getting a bit of an idea of where things are going to go. Now, at the moment, I've only used the Mossy Meadow because I'm just sort of thinking, because I wanted the depths not to be all the same. And if I use the Old Olive, which I also love, it's getting very, very close to what I've watercoloured. So I think I'm going to stick with my Mossy Meadow. Those pieces will get used elsewhere. And I like the depth on that berry burst underneath. Whether I need all of these pieces or not, I don't know, but I don't necessarily want that. Don't necessarily want these straight underneath there either. So let me just take that out, pop that in, and then I want to maybe pop this over the top. Seems funny to do all that watercolouring and then hide it, but I do want that. And now this is our piece that I'm going to put our sentiment on, or I'm thinking of putting the sentiment on, and that may go somewhere about there. So what we might do is stamp our sentiment now, because then we can play. So I'm just going to pop that to one side. I can either do the sentiment in Mossy Meadow or in the Berry Burst. And I want to have a look, see whether this happy birthday will fit. I don't want a sentiment that's going to get too big. That's the thing. So whether because I don't want to cover up all that beautiful work that we've just done. So let me just stamp that on there. Pop it on my block there. Now, which colour am I going to go? I think I'm going to try in the Mossy Meadow. The problem is I think I need to replace my Mossy Meadow. I don't know whether it's my re-inker is really old and it is thick, but I just re-inked this not long ago and it just seems to dry it out very quickly. So let's have a look. Stamp that right in there. So that's not very bright, even though I inked that up quite a bit. Might just give that another go. I've got more paper here somewhere, so that's fine. Let's just see if I can. I think I need to replace the stamp pad and get another ink refill. Just hold that on there a bit longer. Yeah, I'm just not getting the... Let's have a look. I'm not getting the depth in colour that I was hoping to get. What am I going to be happy with? Because I don't really want that covering up. It's going to have to go up to there, I think. Let's just grab another scrap of paper. So I really think I've got an issue with my ink pad. See if I've got a thin strip in here. I've got lots of strips of bits and pieces. There's another one. We'll clean up and have a look. Try this time with the Berry Burst. I think I am going to like the Mossy Meadow better. I think the Berry Burst could be too much. But unless I can get a nice... Oh, it's come out with a halo around it. Tap, tap, tap. You remember, be very light with your ink pads and don't press down too hard unless you're using my Mossy Meadow. Okay, that's a better happy birthday, but whether I like the colour, you guys will have to tell me. What do you think? Should I persevere and try to do the green again? Or do we go the Berry Burst? Which one? Tell me now while I clean off my stamp, because I may see if I can do that Mossy Meadow again and get more ink out of that stamp pad. Love to know what you're thinking, guys. Leslie, you like the Berry Burst? I want to give this card to someone, and I don't know whether she is a real pinky person. That's the only thing I'm thinking. She's not someone I see wearing pink a lot. Let me see if I can get that Mossy Meadow to work one more time. So far, Leslie's the only one. What I've got, this is my Mossy Meadow spoon. Seems like every time I have a problem, I've got to move the ink around. Don't think this stamp pad is that old, really, to be honest. But the ink refill could have been one of the old ones, and I've used it by mistake too. You don't know, Lorraine. Okay, let's just stamp that there. Still not getting a good coverage. Might just have to go for the Berry Burst, just to the fact that I'm not getting the ink coverage I want. Don't know whether I'm getting better or worse. Let's just try it one more. Go right to the edges, because sometimes there's more ink sitting at the edges of your ink pad than there is elsewhere. No, I'm just not getting, it's too dry in the middle. So I think I'm going to have to go with Leslie's choice, the Berry Burst. Okay. We'll pop all that to one side. We'll trim down our Berry Burst one. So we're going to get rid of all of those. And we're going to trim this one down. So I've got my little trimmer here. So I want to cut this fairly thinly because I don't want to Okay, let's just have a look. Going to just slip that underneath there for the moment. I have that going there. That's going to have to go underneath, I think. So we could move that across that way a bit more and have that going. Okay, I'm going to have to start gluing some of this down, I think. Okay, I'm going to pop a couple of dimensionals so I could sit here fussing for a long time. So I'm going to pop a dimensional in the middle about there. And I'm going to pop another one about there. So I'm only putting 2 dimensionals on that. And that I want to sit probably in, don't want to go too close to the edge, but about there. Okay. I'm not going to worry about putting glue underneath here until I know where I want everything else to go. So this one here, don't mind it sitting out. Okay. I'm going to put some glue there and a bit there. Just putting it a little bit on the bottom there at the moment, and that's going to go. Oops. Underneath that. Not worried about it. I've got a bit of glue there, but I'm not worried too much because I'm going to layer this up. So that's going to go there in those places there. And I'm going to cut a bit off that, and that's going to go okay. So I need to put a little bit of a pencil mark, or at least that much cut off that. So just put that sitting there. And then I'm going to cut a bit more off this side. Actually, it needs to go across a bit more. And that's going to go a bit of glue on the back of that. This is where this is just becoming a little bit fiddly because I just want to put a little bit of glue there and then slip that in underneath. Because that happy birthday just fits across there like that. And that should hold all of that in place. Okay, then let's have a look at some of these pieces. So we can bring that one into there. I want that one there. You may or may not need, don't want to overfill it. Okay, I'm going to glue this piece down. And that's going to go underneath. Just lift that up over the top. So that's all going there. Now, do we need to add any more of these pieces here? This is the beauty of not putting too much adhesive in here. You can sort of tuck little bits and pieces in. And I've just cut that off there just so I can tuck that in there. I mustn't have put any glue on that because it's not holding, so let's glue that down. Once you've got all this glued in, you can then come through and add extra glue where you think it might be needed. So what I have is I grab these little scraps that I have cut off. Hello, Kay, how are you? And I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue onto the end of that. And I use this as like a little paintbrush to add little tips of glue so I can sort of glue little bits and pieces down where I want it to go. I want it to look light and fluffy, so I don't want to glue the whole thing down hard, but I just want to add just little bits of glue in a few spots so then things don't sort of get broken off or bent out of shape. So by using this as like a bit of a paintbrush, it just helps you to, and I want that one to go down because we've got a couple of different levels here. Now normally I don't even glue things down this much, but I do want this to be glued down a little bit more than normal. So these areas here, I'm actually quite liking that. I don't think I need much more on there because I do want to add a few embellishments. Now I did put some aside here somewhere. These are the embellishments that come with this particular suite collection. I'm not using the light ones. I am going to be using these ones here. So let me just grab my take a pic tool. And these are in 2 different sizes. So we're going to be using large one. Just trying to think, where am I going to put them? This is my hardest decision when I come to doing these things because I don't use a lot of embellishments and it's always, where do I put them? 2 there. And I want to pop another one there. Always want to use odd numbers, so I'm using, I'm doing sets, groups of 2. Looks like I've got a little bit of ink or something on that. Maybe I had to put a 3rd one there to cover that up. Embellishments are good for that. You can cover up little mistakes like that. Whoops, and that should have been a big, small one, not a big one. Let's pop that one. 1, 2. I'll pop that there and grab a small one, put over the top of that. Don't know where that mark came from. So we've got 3 there. I'm going to put a 3rd one up in that little cluster there. Don't really want to go there, so it's going to have to go just above. So I'm going to do sets. You want to use odd numbers. So I've got 3, and I'm using sets of 3, but you can do 3 and use sets of 2. But as long as you've got like 3 clusters. So whether there's only 1 in a cluster or 2 in a cluster or 3 in a cluster, but you want to go odd numbers. So you go 3 or 5. That makes sense. Okay, so that's the front of our card done. I want to put a bit of glue. So where's my little glue brush? Underneath this watercolour paper. Put a fair bit of glue on there because I need the stronger. Oops. A bit of glue oozing, so I'm just using that corner of my piece of cardstock there just to wipe up those bits that are oozing. And all you do is just throw that away. Now, the only other thing we've got left to do is I wanted to use this one in here. We could probably use another one of these if we wanted to, or we could even that could be quite pretty. Don't want to use too much. We don't want it oozing everywhere because I don't want to close up the card and glue it together. So just a little bit in there. And then we can pop, this will glue the whole thing down. Just going to use another piece of this just to spread that out a little bit. Can't remember which way I had this before. I think that flower needs to be down there. Just hold that closed for a bit. Pop that with the others. That can be used on another card. There we go. There's the inside of our card. And there's the outside of the card. So just having a bit of fun today with some watercolouring. I'll just bring this up so you can see it. So it just has a nice little bit of sparkle. But, you know, if you haven't tried watercolouring, just get a cheap watercolour book from Target, Kmart, Spotlight, $2 shop and play. And, you know, if you don't have the watercolour brushes, as I said, my favourite ones are these ones here, which were all cheapos. And I've probably had these for 15 years or more. You just want to make sure that the tip on them is a really nice fine tip. You don't want to have it too broad, especially if you're doing things like this. And another good thing to get hold, and this is Patty Bennett suggested this a long time ago, and I managed to get this off eBay. This is a hairdresser's dye bottle. It was empty. Got it on eBay, and I just filled that up with water, and it's got a nozzle on it like that, and it just means that when I come to fill these, I don't have to stand under a tap trying to fill them. Well, this one here is a little bit different. I've got to get another piece out, but with most of these, you just take the top off them, pop that down into there, and just give that a good squirt. And I keep that on my desk with water in it all the time. So that and having paper towel. Some people use microfiber cloth. I find paper towels really good. Just be careful if you're blotting up areas where you've got too much water or too much ink, that you've got a clean corner of your paper towel. You know, try different techniques. Always use a stays on ink because that's water, not water soluble. It's a permanent ink, so it's an alcoholic based ink, so you can use it with watercolouring. You could lay your water down first, so practice doing things laying water down first on your image and then adding little drops of ink, but only just, you know, use your very fine tip, and you only use the most smallest amount and let the water wick the ink in. Or you can do it like I've done today and start with a dry paper and take your brush to your paper. Just play. I can't stress it enough. Just play, just stamp out a whole stack of images and just play. And it doesn't matter, as I said before, whether you're using blends, whether you're using watercolor pencils, whether you're just using normal colored pencils, whatever technique, whatever products you're using, whether you're using blends, whether you're using inks, whatever you're coloring with, play and practice until you're happy. form your own technique. Don't need to copy what I've done. I'm hoping I just give you a few tips and encouragement to get in and have a go and try. I'm not perfect at doing this. I've been very lucky. I had a grandmother that was an artist, and I have a sister who's also an artist. So they, over my lifespan, have shown me different tips and things like that as well. So I'm hoping I can pass on some of those tips and some of those ideas to you and encourage you to pull out your aqua painters, to pull out some watercolour paper and your inks and just play. It's the best way to learn. No one's going to teach you unless you play and you work out what works for you. You're going to find that maybe this doesn't work for you, doesn't give you the effect that you like, but doing it a slightly different way does. So just get in there and play. That's my best tip for today, is play. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining me today. As I said, I will pop these measurements up on the weekend on my blog, so you will find them there, at least hopefully by Monday. I do have another card for a blog post to do sometime over the weekend, so that will become a little bit of a priority, but hopefully this will be all up and ready for you. There won't be a printed tutorial with this one because it is just a basic card fold. So have a great weekend. Stay warm, stay dry, and enjoy yourselves. And take care. Bye for now.